Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Najwa Sofia binti Abdullah Adnan. My matric number is 1911238 and my partner is Aisyah Fazana binti Ahmad Rawi and her matric number is 194450. So today we are going to present on the topic of constitutional monarchy, which the question goes, assess the constitutional powers and duties of the monarch under the constitution in relation to the executive, the legislature and also the judiciary. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, so here is our outline of presentation, which is firstly, we are going to present on what is constitutional monarchy, moving on to the executive, legislative, judiciary, and also the conclusion to our presentation today. Okay, so firstly, we are going to take a look at the idea of constitutional monarchy. Okay, so the meaning of constitutional monarchy is a state which is headed by a sovereign who rules according to the constitution, and it is originated from the Greek words which means single or one. Okay, so a constitutional monarchy is like many other countries in the world. It is practiced by Malaysia, United Kingdom, and also Spain. And constitutional monarchy is actually a system of government in which the monarch shares powers with a constitutionally elected government. And although Malaysia is a constitutional monarchy with a constitutional democracy, it has a unique system of monarchy, which in this country we can see that there are 9 rulers, one of whom will become the king of a period of 5 years under a rotation system. And the federal constitution, it spells out the powers of the king and the conference of rulers. The federal and state constitutions prescribe the powers of the YDPA and also the rulers. So it is the exercise of these powers under the federal and state constitution that makes the YDPA and the rulers a constitutional monarch. So the constitutional monarchy in Malaysia, it consists of the YDPA Agong as the head of states of Malaysia, and the 6 sultans, which is Selangor, Terengganu, Kelantan, Pahang, Johor, Kedah, Perak, and Raja in Perlis. The Yang di-Pertuan Besar in Negeri Sembilan and the Yang di-Pertuan Negeri in Malacca, Sarawak and Sabah. So the 4 remaining states that do not have sultans will be appointed by the Yang di-Pertuan Negeri, or also governors. Okay, so there are 2 levels of monarchies in Malaysia, which is monarchy at the federal state and also monarchy at the state level. So the monarchy at the federal level is the YDPA, or the supreme head of the federation, and he is also the king. He is also the head of state of the federation. And at the state level, the head of state are the Malay rulers and also the governors. So the monarchy, it plays a vital role in Malaysia's political system, whether at the federal or the state level. Hence, that's why Malaysia practices a system of government based on the constitutional monarchy and also the parliamentary democracy. So constitutional monarch is actually a democratic monarch, and it is a part of the system of democracy. So that's why a constitutional monarch is a monarchy who exercises his power mainly upon the advice of the elected government. So secondly, constitutional monarchy can be understood as a state which is headed by a sovereign who reigns but does not rule. So what does this actually mean? It means that a constitutional monarch is a monarch who acts on ministerial advice, and also it is elected leader. So a limited monarchy is actually a monarch who has limited discretion, so they cannot do whatever they pleases. And in fact, the action that they perform and most of the functions that are performed are based on the advice which is given by the elected leaders and or the government of the day. So the decision is actually not his decision, but it is based on the decisions of the government. So they are not above the law, but in fact they are the one having the power to uphold the law and also the constitution of Malaysia. So a ruler, though they are sovereign, but they have no autocratic or absolute power. So the Malay rulers and the king, which is Agong, are not above the law. So that's why our country merged together towards constitutional monarchy, which means that the monarch has to act in accordance with the constitution. So the monarch, they cannot run away from the constitution. Whatever the monarch does, it must be in accordance with the constitution. So this is actually the idea of the constitutional monarchy. And in parliamentary system of government, they are the head of the state, but they are not the head of the government. So the parliamentary system, it separates the office of head of state from the head of government. And moving on to the next part of the discussion, which is executive, legislative, and also judiciary. So based on the doctrine of separation of powers, as we all know that the legislature makes the law, the executive administer the law, and also the judiciary adjudicates on disputes which may result from the first and second processes. So, based on these three doctrines, it elaborates a system of checks and balances, whereby it is ensured that the power is not concentrated in only one body, but it is dispersed and also mutually checked. So, Tun Saleh Abbas in Lim Kit Siang against Datuk Sri Muhammad Mahdi Mohamad 1987, 1 MLG 383 observed that when we speak of government, we must remember that this comprises of three branches, namely the executive, the judiciary, and also the legislature. So the courts have a constitutional function to perform, and they are the guardian of the constitution within the terms and structure of the constitution itself. So they not only have the power of construction and interpretation of legislation, but also the power of the judicial review. Okay, so now firstly we are going to look at the YDPA's power in executive. Okay, so in Article 43 of the Federal Constitution, the YDPA has the power to appoint and dismiss prime ministers and also members of the cabinet. So under Article 43, Clause 1, YDPA shall appoint a Jamaah Menteri, which is cabinet of ministers, to advise him in the exercise of his functions. Under Article 43, Clause 2, Clause A, YDPA appoints PM to preside over the cabinet, a member of House of Representatives who, in his judgment, is likely to command the confidence of the majority of the members of that House. And under Article 43, Clause 2, Clause B, YDPA shall, on advice of the PM, appoint other ministers from among the members of either House of Parliament. Okay, so apart from that, the YDPA also can dismiss a prime minister who had lost the confidence of the majority, and the YDPA can advise them to resign. So as we can see in the case of Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim against Perdana Menteri Malaysia 1999, so the plaintiff was the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister. He was dismissed from the cabinet post. So the letter of dismissal, it was signed by the Prime Minister and not the YDPA himself. So the decision to dismiss is formulated by the Prime Minister, but it was communicated to the King, meaning that the King had knowledge of that appointment. So the King then instructs his servants or agents to inform the minister concerned. So the fact that the Prime Minister's letter did not indicate that it was written at the behest of the King, it was actually of no consequence as long as the King was advised and the King was informed about the decision, so it is actually okay. And affidavit indicated that this had been done, so there was no issue. And it was held that the court held that the letter of dismissal need not come from the King or YDPA because it is sufficient for the monarch to be informed first before the PM dismisses his colleague. So actually there was no issue. Okay, so next is under Article 41, the YDPA is the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces of the Federation. And under Article 141, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong is the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. And under Article 137, Clause 1, the Armed Forces Council acts under his general authority. And from here, we can see that the YDPA is the top person in the military, and His Majesty, the King, is the highest commander of the armed forces. His Majesty, the King, carries out his duty under the Constitution, under the advice of the Prime Minister and also the Cabinet. Meanwhile, the hereditary rulers are head of state of his own state and carry out their duties under the advice of the Menteri Besar. However, His Majesty is not bound to the duties and disciplines of the military. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong will appoint a Royal Armed Force Council under Article 137 Constitution. That's why we call our armed forces the Royal Armed Forces, Tentera Diraja Malaysia. And the police is the Polis Diraja Malaysia. So under Article 41, we can see that the YDPA is the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces of the Federation.
Thank you, Najah Sofia. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Aisyah Farzana binti Ahmad Rawi, metric number 1914450, and now I'll continue the discussion on the YDPA's power in relation to legislative. So, as provided under Article 55 of the Federal Constitution, the YDPA shall have the power in summoning, prorogation, and also dissolution of the Parliament. It is provided that the Yang di-Pertuan Agong to have the power to summon the Parliament for meetings from time to time. His Majesty, he cannot let a period of 6 months between the last proceeding in one term with the appointed date for the next meeting for the following term. And then the YDPA, he shall also have the power to prorogue the Parliament upon advice. Even if it is done upon the advice, it can still be considered as one of the significant power of the YDPA. And another significant power of the YDPA is the power to dissolve the Parliament, and this power is exercised by the YDPA at his discretion. So at the end of every 5-year period, the Parliament will be dissolved, and within 60 days from the dissolution, a general election will be held, and the parliamentary proceeding must convene at a date not later than 120 days from the date of its dissolution. Okay, next slide. The next article is Article 66 of the Federal Constitution, where the power of the YDPA is to sanction the bill that is enacted by the Parliament. So once the bills are endorsed by both of the parties of the Parliament, it will be presented to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong for his approval. And then we also have Article 36 of the Federal Constitution, where the YDPA shall have the power to keep and to use the public seal of the Federation. This is interrelated with Article 66 just now, because the YDPA, he shall use the public seal to signify his assent to the bill that is passed by the Parliament. Next. Right? And then we also have Article 45, where the YDPA shall have the power to appoint the senators. So as we all know, in the Dewan Negara, there are two types of senators, which are the elected senators and also the appointed senators. So the YDPA shall have the power to appoint the appointed senators in the Dewan Negara. And then apart from that, we also have Article 65 of the Federal Constitution, where, as we all know, each of the houses it will have one clerk, and that clerk he will be appointed by the YDPA, and he will be chosen among the members of the General Public Service of the Federation, and that person, he shall remain in his position until either he retires or either he resigns. Okay, next slide. Alright, so we are done with the YDPA's power in relation to legislative, and now we will move on to the YDPA's power in relation to judiciary. So, as provided under Article 122B of the Federal Constitution, the YDPA, he is responsible for appointing judges of the Superior Court. Who are they? They are the Chief Justice of the Federal Court, the President of the Court of Appeal, and also the Chief Judges of the High Court. So, in appointing the judges of the Superior Court, YDPA is required to act on the advice of the Prime Minister and also after consulting the Conference of Rulers. We have the case of Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim against Public Prosecutor, where the court has made it clear that the actual appointing authority is actually in the Prime Minister, and the Yang di-Pertuan Agong could not but follow the decision that is made by the Prime Minister. Apart from that, it has also been further explained in the decision of the court, where in the context of Article 122B Clause 1 of the Constitution, where the Prime Minister had advised that a person be appointed a judge, and if the Conference of Rulers does not agree or withholds its views or delays the giving of its advice with or without reason, legally the Prime Minister can insist that the appointment be proceeded with. And apart from that, it was also further explained in the matter of the appointment of judges, the YDPA when the YDPA consults the Conference of Rulers, he does not seek its consent, but he merely consults. So when the Conference of Rulers give its advice, opinion, or views, the question is that, is the YDPA bound to accept? In this case, clearly it's not. So, but however, it should be noted that this is only the legal position that is explained by the court, because in practice, it would much depend on the political realities. Or, for instance, we have the influence and also the standing of the Prime Minister as well as the Conference of Rulers. So, although legally, it can be said that the Conference of Rulers' opinion does not amount to much, but in practice, it may be otherwise. Okay, next. We also have Article 1 to 5 of the Federal Constitution, where under the article, the YDPA, he may remove the judges on the recommendation of the tribunal. Where to illustrate, we have the case of Tun Datuk Haji Muhammad Saleh bin Abis and Tan Sri Datuk Abdul Hamid bin Omar and others, where it has been said that the function of the tribunal is to inquire and investigate on the representation and the report to the YDPA with any recommendation it may make. And the tribunal body is a body which investigates and it does not decide. It is performing a constitutional function, and the tribunal should not therefore be restrained from performing its constitutional function. And finally, the member of the tribunal are appointees of the YDPA, and from the language of Article 1 to 5 of the Federal Constitution, it is clear that the YDPA is entitled to the report of the tribunal. So we can conclude here from the case that the YDPA shall act on the recommendation of the tribunal in removing the judges. Okay, next. Okay, lastly, we have Article 1 to 5 of the Federal Constitution, where the YDPA shall have the power to pardon anyone who has committed an offence in the Federal Territories of Kuala Lumpur, Labuan and also Putrajaya, as well as offences that have been tried in the Court of Martial. And then, apart from that, Agong can also pardon the offences and also suspend sentences in any court under any law regulating Islamic religious affairs in the state of Malacca, Pening, Sabah, Sarawak and Federal Territories. Why is that so? Why is it only these states? Because the YDPA is the head of Islam, and therefore he will be the head of Islam in states that does not have any ruler. Alright, so in conclusion, the YDPA is conferred with an extensive list of power, yes, but however, the Federal Constitution restricts the power by consistently directing the YDPA to act on advice of the Prime Minister or the Minister or other authorized person or institution. So the monarch is the legal head of the state, but the Prime Minister is the de facto head of the government. So I think that is all from us. Thank you.